The World Health Organization declares a global emergency for the Chinese coronavirus. This after the number of infected spikes more than tenfold in just a week. The UK enters its final day as an EU member state after 47 years in the bloc. Prime Minister Boris Johnson hails the dawn of a new era, while we take a look at how Brexit will affect British citizens here in France. And accusations of rape rocking French sports teams. Several former figure skaters come forward, saying they were abused by coaches when they were as young as 13 years old. Those are our top headlines here on France 24. I'm Alexander Orcott. A global emergency has been declared after cases of coronavirus increased more than 10 times in the space of a week. The latest figures by China's health ministry has put the total infected at more than 9,600, with more than 213 deaths so far. 18 other countries have also confirmed cases. Meanwhile, several nations have been evacuating their citizens from the Chinese city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak, which is now on lockdown. Some of the latest are South Korean nationals that have just recently landed in Seoul on a chartered aircraft. The 300 people will now be quarantined at 2 temporary facilities. Catherine Viet has more.
They've become a hot commodity as people worried about the coronavirus rush to buy face masks. From Bangkok and beyond, many people won't venture out without wearing the protective gear. Demand is far outstripping supply as stores post signs saying masks and alcohol gel out of stock. But do they work? Health officials say it can be a sensible precaution.
In the context of a coronavirus type infection where we're still waiting to see how the transmission actually happens, whether in this person-to-person transmission looks clear, but whether it's very unlikely to be completely airborne, it's probably on surfaces and through contact. So masks are very sensible for avoiding hand-to-mouth contact and passing the virus, and also being spread through coughs and sneezes.
As concerns rise over cases involving patients who had not been to China, like those in Taiwan, Germany, Vietnam, and Japan, officials sought to reassure the public. As many countries carry out repatriation efforts, many airlines, including British Airways and Air Canada, have announced they're either suspending or cutting back service to China. Russia says it will shut its border with China to prevent the spread of the virus and will also stop issuing electronic visas to Chinese nationals.
Well, with the virus topping news headlines, including our own, many people of Asian descent have been denouncing the racial abuse they've been receiving, both online and in the streets. France 24 went to the Chinese district in southern Paris, where New Year celebrations planned for last weekend had to be scrapped. Julie Dugeloff, Julian Sauvaget and Maria Sophos report.
For this Asian supermarket, January is usually one of its busiest periods, as Paris's Chinese community prepares to celebrate the new year. However, this year, due to concerns over the spread of coronavirus, the festivities, including the customary parade, will not go ahead this weekend, much to the disappointment of the supermarket's owner.
This time last year, our sales increased by 15 to 20%, which we've not seen this year. Social media tends to exaggerate. In France, we are far from the epicenter of the virus.
Only a few cases have been confirmed in France so far. However, the country's Asian community feels stigmatized.
People look at us strangely in the metro. I got a message from a friend. He entered a full metro train with a mask on, and everyone left.
I'm Vietnamese, but they think I'm Chinese, so in the metro, on the street, or in the neighborhood, they're going to avoid me.
In this district of Paris, coronavirus is at the forefront of many people's minds, but residents don't want to give in to hysteria.
We're in France. We're well protected.
It doesn't bother me, and if I want to go to an Asian restaurant, this wouldn't stop me.
Anything can happen, anywhere and to anybody. We have to live normally. We've got to remain calm.
A call for calm and common sense echoed by a number of associations who are asking people to rebuke racism against Asian people via social media using the hashtag #IamNotAvirus.
Moving on now, the clock is ticking and there are less than 24 hours now left until the UK leaves the European Union. With an unceremonious written procedure this Thursday in Brussels, Brexit cleared its final hurdle following 3 years of tortuous negotiations. Little will change in real terms as of Saturday morning, with the UK continuing to follow EU rules and paying into it during the transition period that's set to last until the end of this year. The UK will now be looking to secure new trade deals with the likes of the United States. Top US diplomat Mike Pompeo said Brexit will bring enormous benefits.
I hope the United Kingdom remains a close partner of both the United States and the EU. We do this around the world. They are not exclusive relationships. The United Kingdom can, and I am confident will have, close relationships with the EU as well. I'm sure there'll be friction between the United Kingdom and the EU, just as there is from time to time with the United States. But I hope this relationship is one where we will work together. We'll work together in all the places that matter on human rights issues around the world. We've talked about trying to get our free trade agreement done. It's important for our two nations. It's really important because it can set a model for what the standards ought to look like inside of these trading relationships.
Well, here in France, Brexit is likely to affect towns where British citizens have worked as city councillors. Now that the UK is breaking away, those British nationals won't be eligible to run for office or even vote. Some wonder how their lives could be affected. Shirley Sitbon takes a closer look.
This village in Normandy has 216 residents. A quarter of them are British. That's why town councillors like Patrick Head are so valuable. They've been a link between French authorities and new British residents who know little about local laws and regulations.
When you come from a different culture, even if it's similar, you're never certain you've got things right.
But now city halls will lose people like Patrick Head because they're not French. British nationals have been allowed to run for local elections, except for the mayor's position, since 2001. And their work was much appreciated. Overall, there's 757 of them. Now, they can't run, and they can't even vote. Small towns worry that some British residents would head back home.
Over the past 20 years, British families have been arriving here after French residents have left.
Same story in southwestern France, an area appreciated by UK nationals who are now fearful over the future. They've paid their taxes here for years or decades. Will they still be entitled to health and social benefits after Brexit?
I feel isolated and abandoned.
There are ways to remain in France, though, and to run again for office. These residents can try and apply for the French citizenship.
Well, before we move on, a reminder to make sure that you do tune in to us here at France 24 this Friday from 11 p.m. Paris time for a special programme presented by Catherine Nicholson on Brexit. Francois Picard will then be bringing you a special edition of the debate. The UK has left the EU, starting at 8:10 a.m. on Saturday morning. At least 10 civilians, including children, have been killed in a fresh airstrike in Syria's Idlib province. Russian warplanes allegedly bombarded a hospital in the last rebel stronghold following 9 years of civil war. President Bashar al-Assad's forces have stepped up assaults in Idlib since last week.
This is what remains of a hospital in Nariha. Only hours before, it was treating patients. Now almost all medical equipment has been destroyed. A nearby residential building and a bakery were also hit. Some people were killed on the spot.
I was sitting inside the hospital when warplanes came over. I ran out of the building with another doctor. Then a second wave of bombings came. I escaped, but the doctor was injured. Then came a third airstrike.
Witnesses and the London-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights say Russian warplanes carried out the airstrikes. Moscow denies the allegation. In recent days, Syrian government forces backed by Russian air power have stepped up a campaign to retake the last remaining rebel-held territory in the province of Idlib. The latest in Ariha came a day after President Bashar al-Assad's regime announced it had recaptured around 30 towns in the region. Among them, Marat al-Numan, which was one of the major centres for protest when the uprising began in 2011. Its recapture marked a symbolic but also strategic victory as the town sits on the M5 highway.
It's very important that we captured the international highway that led to Aleppo and connected Aleppo to Damascus through Idlib, Hama and Homs.
The US's special envoy to Syria says that the current offensive in the northwest of the country has pushed some 700,000 people to flee towards the Turkish border just in the past few days.
Accusations of rape and sexual abuse are rocking the sports world here in France, in particular the realm of figure skating. Several former skaters have come forward saying they were raped by their coaches when they were as young as 13. Alison Sargent has more.
For 30 years, Sarah Abitbol remained silent. Now the world bronze medalist and 10-time French champion is telling her story. In a new book, the skater writes that her former coach, Gilles Bayer, raped her when she was 15. Abitbol says it was the first time a man had ever touched her, abuse that allegedly continued multiple times a week for 2 years.
I was sleeping with my teddy bears and he woke me up with his torch. It was a nightmare. It was horrible, and it's still horrible today. And that's why I'm talking about it, because unfortunately I'm still not well. I'm taking antidepressants. And so I'm speaking up to break the silence and to help all of the other victims who can't speak themselves.
Abitbol is not alone in breaking her silence. 3 other skaters have come forward accusing 3 coaches, including Bayer, of rape and abuse when they were as young as 13. Bayer has refused to comment on the allegations, and the statute of limitations has already expired. The coach was investigated by France's sports ministry for other offenses in the early 2000s. His contract was terminated, but he remained close to the skating federation.
We asked the federation to remove him from his role as a coach for other violations, not for this one specifically. But the federation, knowing that, still put him back into the system. I expect from sports federations a real effort and a real change in mentality.
France's sports minister summoned the head of the French Skating Federation to discuss the new allegations. And after similar stories of abuse from swimmers and tennis players, the ministry will also hold a conference for all sports federations next month.
Staying in France, an appeals court has acquitted a French cardinal of covering up the sexual abuse of minors. The Lyon Appeals Court released a document following its ruling this Thursday, saying it found no intentional element showing a cover-up. Cardinal Philippe Barbarin had been convicted in March and given a 6-month suspended sentence for failing to report a predator priest to police. But Pope Francis refused to accept the cardinal's decision to resign until the appeals process was completed. And finally, the US rapper 50 Cent has been honoured with a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. A large crowd gathered out to watch the ceremony, where the rapper was flanked by fellow stars of the genre, Dr. Dre and Eminem, who 50 said helped propel his career. In an emotional moment of his own speech, the rapper also paid tribute to his friend Kobe Bryant, who was killed in a helicopter crash last weekend.
Well, Kobe's representation in one word, discipline, right? 2 words, passion. He was passionate, and he worked harder than a lot of the other guys around him to beat Kobe Bryant.
Those are all our top stories this hour. Do stay tuned to us here at France 24.